Hello everyone, this is Shondip Chatterjee. I teach history at Banwarilal Bharatiya College, Asansol, West Bengal. And today I'd like to make a short video on a specific theme of history of modern China. And it's called 100 Days of Reform. The first question that might come to your mind, why I chose this topic, and the answer is, on surface level, it's a historical event that's part of Chinese history, and but if we go deeper, the implications are wider, and it's multi-layered. The historical event was multi-layered with multiple factors associated with the event, and as the name suggests, it went on for 100, almost 100 days. The deadline is 1898 June 11 to 1898 September 21. So at first I'd like to give a bit of a backdrop. What's the background to this, reformist zeal of the emperor? In 1898 was a time when China was, facing had already faced a number of setbacks, a number of failures. They lost their war to Japan in 1894, 1895, Sino-Japanese War. Also, in 1895, there was this attempt at reformation. It was called self-strengthening movement, and it also failed in a big way. At the same time, foreign powers were gaining, confidence, gaining more power within Chinese territory. They had been there for a long time, but around that point of time, a number of foreign powers were making their presence felt in various ways, not only in terms of market, not only in terms of business, but also in terms of culture and societal pressure. So, in this background, we have to look at the events pertaining to 100 Days of Reform. And the then Chinese emperor was Emperor Guangxu. And what set him apart from his predecessors was his attempt at reforming Chinese society, Chinese administration, Chinese education, and various aspects of China. And the major accusation against the dynasty that he belonged to, that was Qing dynasty, Qing, that the most of the emperors, they did not introduce enough reforms, or they did not care about modernizing China along Western lines, or so. But he was different. Emperor Guangxu was different, and he made those efforts. And he was mainly supported by a progressive thinkers. His name was Kang Youwei, Youwei. So, and these progressive thinkers, he came up with a number of reform propositions, and Emperor Guangxu was pretty impressed by the proposals that was put forward by Kang Youwei, and he approved of most of them. And it included reforming educational system, like introduction of national schools, setting up of universities, and various other reforms. Along with, they wanted to reform the military. They wanted to reform the administrative structure. At the same time, there used to be a civil service examination, whose major thrust of that examination was on Chinese classical literature, not on other aspects of or the specific aspects of administration. And this demand had been there for a long time. So Emperor Guangxu, wanted to reform this civil service exam along modern lines, along Western lines. So there were various reforms associated with these so-called 100 Days of Reform. However, the conservative thinkers, they did not quite like all these measures introduced by Emperor along with Kang Youwei and various other progressive thinkers. They were pretty alarmed, especially not only about the reforms themselves, but also the pace with which the reforms were being implemented. And some who were in the opposition, who also felt that these are too radical, and these reforms normally would take some time to be implemented. But they were of the opinion that Emperor and his associates were making haste. They're kind of trying to introduce those reforms quite hurriedly. So there was a huge opposition against these reforms, and these conservatives, they rallied behind Empress Cixi, Cixi. And this Empress Cixi used to be the emperor's aunt. So, on surface level, there's this tussle between aunt and his nephew and her nephew, Cixi and Guangzhou. At the same time, tussle between progressive thinkers and conservative thinkers, and so that's what was interesting about these 100 years of reform, and that's why it was multi-layered. However, after staunch opposition from the conservative thinkers and Empress Cixi, uh, the Emperor Guangzhou had to abdicate his throne, had to give away his throne, and he accepted defeat. He was put in house arrest. So, how, irrespective of continued efforts and very, you know, and number of measures introduced by the emperor, um, these reforms ultimately failed. However, on the surface, it might seem that these measures failed, or these measures did not see the light of the day. But in the long run, these reforms actually paved the way for modernization of Chinese society, Chinese culture, Chinese administration. And also, political history of China gained momentum from this time on. Because in 1911, we came across this famous Chinese Revolution, and some historians are of the opinion that this, inception of this revolution, the ideological background of this revolution, was to a great extent provided by these 100 days of reforms which were implemented by Guangzhou Emperor and his very trusted associate Kang Huwei. So again, I would like to repeat, in the short run, although these measures failed, although the emperor was not successful in his attempt at modernizing Chinese society and administration, but in the long run, he and his associates definitely left some very important legacy to be followed by the future generations of China. Thank you.